Hi, my name's J.R. Bookwalter, director of The Dead Next Door, Robot Ninja, and Ozone, and you are about to watch the VHS podcast with two crazy guys from Portugal.
Num passado longínquo, quando o meu amigo Paulo Fajardo era um jovem arqueólogo em busca de diamantes em estado bruto na Feira da Ladra, ele encontrou em DVD uma peça de antiquário sci-fi muito obscura de 1993 chamada Ozone, realizada por um tal de J.R. Bookwalter.
Mas atenção, era um DVD pirata, não era um DVD original.
Se fosse original já era estranho, então um DVD pirata...
Vamos lá, por amor de Deus, quem é que iria trazer um DVD original? Quem é que iria editar um DVD original daquele filme aqui em Portugal? Opa.
A semente da curiosidade estava lançada e a vida e obra deste desconhecido realizador de Ohio rapidamente seria descoberta aqui no VHS, logo num dos primeiros episódios na origem deste podcast. Em 2018, entramos finalmente em contacto com Bookwalter, um apaixonado por cinema, que passou grande parte da sua juventude a realizar pérolas sangrentas para o videoclube a quase custo zero. Mas, mais recentemente, tem-se ocupado em recuperar e remasterizar alguns dos seus filmes independentes e dar-lhes nova vida junto dos entusiastas do cinema chunga pela internet.
Bota chunga nisso.
O último a receber cara nova é um filme cujo título é, logo à partida, uma mistura vencedora: Robot Ninja. Lindo. Daqui a nada, J.R. Bookwalter regressa ao sofá do VHS, mas para já vou deixar o Paulo explicar como é que foi o seu primeiro encontro com esta inigualável peça de comédia de horror de 1989.
Isto é muito difícil explicar isto. Opa, naquelas feiras havia aqueles panais com os DVDs piratas à venda por 1 euro ou 2 euros ou o que era. Foi um primo meu da Tocha. Ele mora mesmo frente à área, ao recinto onde fazem a feira. E então ele comprou o DVD do Ozone e um dia eu chego lá à casa dele e estou lá a desfolhar os DVDs que ele para lá tinha. E vejo o Ozone, e a capa era bastante enigmática e eu disse assim, deixa-me ver isto. E eu vi em casa dele o filme e eu assim, isto é tão mau que até dói. Será que este gajo fez mais alguma coisa? E foi aí que eu fui pesquisar o que é que este gajo teria feito mais. E para minha surpresa o gajo tinha feito mais algumas coisas. E logo ainda por cima, o primeiro filme dele, que era o Dead Next Door, tinha uma ligação ao Sam Raimi, uma ligação muito obscura ao Sam Raimi, que era, na altura, era o meu realizador de eleição. E o gajo conseguiu convencer o Sam Raimi a produzir o filme por 200 e não sei quantos mil dólares, que foi aquilo que o Sam Raimi deu para fazerem o filme.
A história do Dead Next Door está contada num podcast.
É verdade.
Nós ainda éramos uns mancebos, estávamos a experimentar fazer um podcast ainda... pela primeira vez, ainda não sabíamos bem como é que isto funcionava.
Foi o terceiro episódio, não é?
Mas, sim, o terceiro episódio, sim. Portanto, está lá mesmo para o fundinho da lista, mas com certeza... Enfim, tem um podcast dedicado. Hoje, no pouco tempo que nos resta antes de ouvirmos a entrevista, queremos falar no Robot Ninja.
Robot Ninja.
E tu também o viste muito cedo.
Que é um filme que não tem robôs nem tem ninjas. Atenção.
Pois não tem.
Agora, eu já não vi o filme há muitos anos. Já não vi, confesso. Apesar de eu ter recebido um DVD autografado pelo próprio Bookwalter, eu recebi... Ele enviou-me quase assim na biografia dele completa.
Sim. E uns autocolantes também. Ele enviou uns autocolantes.
Ele enviou-me uma carrada de coisas. Enviou-me o Dead Next Door em Blu-ray já, remasterizado. Mas o Robot Ninja foi em DVD ainda. Eu já não vi o filme há muitos anos. Ainda não tinha desembalado o DVD que ele me tinha enviado. E fui vê-lo ontem de propósito para a gravação de hoje do podcast do Robot Ninja. E confesso que dormitei um bocadinho durante o filme.
O filme é muito longo, tem para aí 1h10 ou uma coisa assim. Tem 1h18, pronto. Mas com os tiras-lhes os créditos e fica com 1h10. Pronto.
Exatamente. Na altura, na época, o filme estreou em 89 e na altura havia os filmes do Charles Bronson filmes de vigilantes, e este filme é um bocadinho isso, é uma história de um vigilante, mas neste caso é um ator que interpretava o Robot Ninja numa série de televisão, que é uma série que é cancelada.
Eu acho que ele não era o ator, ele era o autor do personagem. E
eu acho que ele também era o ator.
O ator.
Eu acho que ele também era o ator.
Ele aparece, mas nunca tira a máscara. Portanto, eu fico com a ideia de que existe uma cadeia de televisão que está a fazer uma série baseada no teu personagem de banda desenhada, mas o gajo não se identifica.
Mas eu acho que ele também é o ator. Eu acho que ele também é o ator.
Eu
acho que sim.
Facto é, ele não se identifica com o personagem e decide cortar o vínculo com a série de televisão e criar ele próprio. E dar ele continuidade ao seu personagem de BD. E às tantas decide ele próprio, não é? Depois de
transformar-se no Robot Ninja.
Depois de assistir a um crime de violação e assassinato na estrada, decide ele próprio transformar-se.
Sim, mas a questão aqui é que tudo isto tem um look muito amador.
Pois.
A iluminação
e tudo isto parece incrível, parece uma história incrível. Mas, vamos aqui reduzir um bocadinho as nossas expectativas e perceber que isto é um filme daqueles filmados. Tu reúnes a família e os amigos, não é?
É um
e
pouco
fazes
isso,
um filme filmado aos fins de semana.
Nas
horas vagas.
Isto faz-me lembrar a versão do Ninja das Caldas, que foi para a SIC Radical, em que eles tiveram que prolongar algumas cenas para que o Ninja das Caldas tivesse a duração suficiente para poder
entrar na categoria de longa-metragem, não é?
Exatamente. Porque há aqui muitas coisas que são denunciadas na edição. As cenas estão muito prolongadas para que o filme acabe por ter uma duração de longa-metragem. As reações, seja a tiros, seja a murros, seja a facadas, seja o que for, os atores estão tipo meio segundo à espera que as coisas aconteçam e depois é que reagem. E convenhamos que não são atores profissionais, exceto, e aí é que a minha sobrancelha franziu bastante, foi quando há dois atores profissionais que aparecem no filme, já bastante desaparecidos do ecrã, que era o Burt Ward. Vocês pelo nome provavelmente não chegaram lá, mas o Burt Ward era o...
Holy smokes, Batman!
Exatamente, era o Robin da série dos anos 60 do Batman.
Com o Adam West, sim.
Exatamente, com o Adam West. E a Linnea Quigley era uma
era a
Scream Queen.
A secretária dele.
Exatamente, era uma antiga Scream Queen que faz de secretária, e são papéis, aquilo foi gravado numa tarde, na melhor das hipóteses, com uma iluminação mesmo em cima da cara deles, a fazer uma sombra. É aqueles erros todos de principiantes estão ali todos, porque nota-se que havia ali uma grande vontade, uma grande paixão de querer fazer algo. E eu revejo-me nisso porque eu próprio também fazia os meus home movies, e da intenção ao resultado final vai uma grande diferença, não é? Mas temos ali também a participação do Scott Spiegel e do David DeCouteau, um prolífico realizador de série B.
Mas tu vês aqui ao IMDb, ao perfil do gajo.
É o Puppet Master. O Puppet Master é
provavelmente. O gajo tem para aí 4 ou 5 filmes por ano e dá para perceber perfeitamente o estilo.
Eu se calhar já vi metade dos filmes de que ele já realizou.
Sim.
Mas e são filmes que até se veem bem, independentemente de ele fazer 5 ou 6 por ano, desde que nós colocamos a nossa fasquia também.
Ele tem aqui uma saga
B,
a partir de 2019 que é o The Wrong qualquer coisa, The Wrong Stepmother, The Wrong Boy Next Door.
Não, isso eu não vi. Eu já não vejo filmes dele.
Eu não estou a ver o que é isto, mas tem...
Eu acho que as últimas coisas que eu vi dele eram associadas ao Puppet Master. Eram coisas do Puppet Master, talvez 10, 11 ou 12.
Ele realizou o Puppet Master 3, pelo menos. Mas pronto, está por aqui, não é? O gajo ia passar na rua e chamaram-no, basicamente.
Exatamente.
O Dead Next Door foi um filme que foi filmado em 8mm e este Robot Ninja foi um filme que foi filmado em 16mm. A última vez que vi o Dead Next Door foi uma versão em DVD e tanto esse Dead Next Door como este Robot Ninja receberam versões remasterizadas em Blu-ray agora mais recentemente. Ou seja,
atenção, foram versões que ele basicamente reeditou os filmes.
Exatamente. No caso do...
Não é uma remasterização.
Sim, não
de um
é
master qualquer.
Na master,
ele reeditou o filme.
É praticamente reeditado. Então, no caso deste Robot Ninja, o gajo diz num dos documentários de extras, que também está no YouTube, se tiverem curiosidade, ele diz que chegou inclusivamente a colocar novos efeitos sonoros, transportou a película toda para a pista, mantendo a edição original, a coisa foi toda refeita quase de raiz.
A questão é, tu tens um desastre, tu tens ali um desastre, e o que é que tu podes fazer para melhorar aquele desastre?
Uma das maiores evidências que estes filmes têm do facto de terem sido de baixo orçamento foi o tratamento que eles tiveram em pós-produção. Eles foram editados e convertidos para vídeo e depois reconvertidos outra vez para película, num sistema já um bocadinho ultrapassado, já no final da década de 80. E os filmes sofreram muito, a qualidade, o aspecto dos filmes.
Sim, eles ficavam muito com um aspecto muito degradado.
Ficaram muito degradados e isso não ajuda nada ao aspecto.
Não, e depois com as cópias
já por ele muito baixo orçamento. E ele teve a sorte de conseguir recuperar as masters originais, tanto do Dead Next Door como deste Robot Ninja, e refez tudo agora. Eu tive o prazer de ver um filme que não é assim tão mau como se pinta. E eu acho que as versões em DVD e em videocassete então nem se fala, mas as versões em DVD que existem destes filmes tornam-nos...
Viste um mau filme com a melhor qualidade possível.
Vi um melhor filme com uma melhor qualidade, e eu acho que há algumas qualidades que ficaram perdidas no processo e que agora com as versões remasterizadas conseguem vir ao de cima. O Robot Ninja é um filme muito escuro, aquilo foi filmado tudo à noite, com holofotes péssimos,
Mas não é só isso. O problema mais grave, para além dos atores serem amadores, como era óbvio,
sim, mas
era
tu desculpas isso.
Era os tempos, os ritmos de edição.
Eu não achei assim tão flagrante isso.
Eu não vi a versão Blu-ray. E a versão que saiu na altura, tu tens, por exemplo, um gajo a dar um tiro e tens tipo 2 segundos depois a pessoa à espera de levar o tiro.
Sim, tem lá esses problemas todos de amadorismo, sim, mas eu acho que o facto de pelo menos conseguires ver melhor a imagem e perceber melhor o que estava a acontecer dá alguma dignidade extra ao filme. Depois o facto deste filme ser claramente uma paródia ao género. E isso acaba por lhe dar algum benefício, o facto de ele não se levar tão a sério.
Claramente.
Não é um filme de super-herói, é um gajo a tentar ser um super-herói, um vigilante, como tu estavas a dizer, mas que também não é muito bem sucedido no trabalho que faz.
Em nada. É terrível.
E o filme tem lá aqueles aspectos gore que são extremamente baixo orçamento, mas que ainda assim são divertidos de se ver no ecrã.
Sim, tem lá uma cena muito Exterminador Implacável 1, que é a cena do braço. Para além dos cartazes do Dead Next Door, havia cartazes
do Dead Next Door, esse que ainda não teria saído quando ele andava a rodar este, mas ok.
Exato.
Mas pronto,
mas havia 1001 cartazes de outros filmes que notava-se que eram referências que ele tinha.
Ou não, se calhar era um gajo tipo eu, que coleciona pósteres e que na hora da verdade é giro colá-los na parede.
Até o nome dos personagens eram referências a autores que ele venerava na altura. Não? Tu tens personagens que têm o nome de O'Bannon, Spinell, De Palma e Cox, Cameron, tens aqui uma carrada de nomes das personagens que obviamente são referências.
Se tiverem que ver uma versão, vejam definitivamente a versão Blu-ray, não haja dúvida. Apesar de não ser um filme brilhante, apesar de ser um daqueles
mau filme,
zero orçamento,
melhor qualidade possível.
mau filme, mas acho que se quem estiver dentro deste espírito, e muitos dos nossos ouvintes estarão com certeza porque nos conhecem, acho que conseguem tirar algum entretenimento daqui. Não é de longe a pior coisa que eu alguma vez vi, não é? Há coisas piores.
Bem, eu não sei o que é que o Daniel tem visto ultimamente ou o resto da vida dele, mas este está ali entre as piores coisas que eu já vi. Eu gosto do realizador, mas se calhar
gostas do realizador como pessoa, é tipo um porreiro, né? Sem talento, mas é um fixe.
É o espírito de entrega, de paixão pelo cinema, aquela vontade de querer ir para a rua e fazer um filme, criar algo. E isto está aqui tudo presente e eu consigo ver o filme que eles visualizaram na cabeça, mas que não é o filme que nós vemos de facto. Não é o filme de facto que eu estou a ver, mas é o filme que eu sei que eles pretendiam fazer.
Isso é quase tipo uma versão meta de ver cinema. Eu não estou a ver o filme deles. Eu estou a ver o filme que eles queriam fazer.
Eu só consigo entrar neste limbo ou neste processo, Inception, neste modo Inception, só com estes autores do Último Reduto.
Ele era um garoto. Também temos que pensar nisso, que ele era um garoto, pá, não é? A gente pensa,
mas
a gente
é
fala,
isso. Mas a parte gira é tu perceberes isso tudo. Ok, há muitos realizadores que esperam pela hora certa, que é de reunir as condições todas para poderem fazer um filme da melhor maneira possível.
E este gajo arranca o autocarro sem ter as malas feitas.
Exatamente.
Isso também é nobre à sua maneira, não é?
É isso, é precisamente isso.
Um dos primeiríssimos episódios que gravámos para o VHS e um dos primeiros casos de cinema zombie dos calabouços do videoclube pessoal do Paulo, isto em 2012, vejam bem, foi The Dead Next Door. Um festival gore de baixíssimo orçamento, fortemente inspirado nos zombies de Romero e com um patrocínio pela porta das traseiras de ninguém menos que Sam Raimi. Na altura estávamos longe de imaginar que dentro de poucos anos estaríamos à conversa com J.R. Bookwalter, o escritor e realizador desta empreitada. The Dead Next Door enfrentou uma longa e penosa produção e seria lançado em 1989, praticamente em simultâneo com a sua segunda longa-metragem, Robot Ninja. O que vão agora ouvir é uma conversa com o autor destes dois no-budget de final da década de 80, cuja rodagem foi alimentada, sobretudo, pela paixão de fazer cinema a todo o custo. Ora, ouça.
Let's start on your cinema roots. IMDb says that you grew up watching the TV series Dark Shadows. Is this true? And was it a big influence on you?
Yes, in fact, it was my mother's fault because she, after she had given birth to me and was home with me as I was growing up, she was watching Dark Shadows when it was first on the air in the late 60s. So I blame it on her, even though she's not the biggest fan of horror movies. It was like it all on Dark Shadows. That's where it started.
So you were one of those kids that was raised by TV.
No, I spent plenty of time outside playing, but yeah, I mean that was such a great time for television. You know, I was born in 1966, so I'm really a child of the 70s by the time I realized what was going on. And there was so much great stuff on TV, Johnny Sacco and the Flying Robot, and there was the Godzilla cartoons and all this. You would see all this stuff on Saturdays. They would have all these great horror hosts Friday nights and Saturday during the day where they would show all these old movies. So it was a great time to sort of absorb all that stuff. You know, now everybody can just pull up whatever they want whenever they want. You know, download illegally or legally, either one. But now, at that time, it had to be programmed, and you had to discover it. So I think it was a great time to be a kid to sort of discover all these influences.
Do you have kids of your own?
I have two. I didn't have kids until I was much later in life. My son is 8, and my daughter will be 2 in a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So your oldest kid, did he ever saw one of your films?
Yes, in fact, we did some theatrical screenings of The Dead Next Door a couple years ago after I restored it with the 2K restoration, and I wouldn't let him see the whole movie. He kept coming into the room when I was working on it. I saw bits and pieces, but I wouldn't let him watch it until he could sit in a theater and see the whole thing from beginning to end uninterrupted. And he got quite a kick out of that. I mean, especially at the time, he was 6, almost 7. Speaking of Ozone's the one he really wants to see. He's like dying to see it, but I haven't quite figured out how to explain to him what's going on in that movie.
You were only 23 years old when you directed The Dead Next Door, your first film.
No, I started that when I was 19.
Oh yeah, 19. Oh yeah, it took 4 years to complete.
Yes, yeah. So I was 23 by the time it was finished, essentially.
Okay, it's a big guilty pleasure of mine. How did this film came to life?
Well, I was attending school at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and I'm in Akron, Ohio. Pittsburgh's only 2 hours away, and I chose Pittsburgh specifically because I was such a huge fan of George Romero, and I thought, well, if nothing else, maybe I can get a job working on a George Romero film while I'm there. So I took photography because they didn't really have anything, they didn't have film classes or anything like that, and I was able to get my mother to sort of sign off on it. Even though she didn't know what my ulterior motive was in going. So I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, which is a 2-year school. I made it about just a little bit into the second year, my apartment was robbed. And I was kind of at that point, hadn't really done anything. The highlight of my whole college at that point was I was a zombie extra in Day of the Dead, which had nothing to do with school. I actually had to play hooky.
You could die happy. You could die happy at that time.
Yeah. So that was enough. I was like, I'm done here. So I moved back home and was kind of just bumming around my mother's house for a chunk of the summer, and was flipping through the pages of old Fangoria magazines and came across this article on the Evil Dead that that had been several years prior to that, and sort of remembered, these guys are in Detroit, Michigan, which is only a few hours by car from me. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try and get in with them. Well, anyways, long story short, I actually dug up their phone number for their office, called them, and got a phone call back from very nice call from Sam Raimi, and basically set up a meeting to go up there and just meet them and show them some of my short films and see what would happen. And lo and behold, that meeting went well enough that by the end of it, he was basically like, well, if you get something going, let me know, and I might kick some money into it. So sort of convinced me, because he sat me down and said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I kind of want to take the George Romero route and do like commercials or industrial videos around, and then eventually make a feature. And he's like, well, why don't you just go make a feature? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I guess I could do that. And he basically said, if you do one, I'll put some money into it.
Okay.
So why is the guy only credited as the master cylinder?
That was all on him. I think it was two things. I'm sure there was some part of him, because it was such a low budget movie, that he wanted to put some distance between his work and that. But I think the other thing was he also didn't want to. He was careful not to overshadow me. The reference he kept bringing up was Demons, the movie, the Baba movie, Demons. How it was basically Dario Argento presents Demons, and Argento sort of overshadowed Baba on that film, and I guess that's how he explained it to me. He was like he doesn't want it to be Sam Raimi presents The Dead Next Door. He wants it to be The Dead Next Door, a J.R. Bookwalter.
Or he was playing safe and he was afraid the movie was not going to be good.
He never said that, but if that was his rationale, it's totally understandable. Because he doesn't, believe me, the short films I showed him were really like not that much, they were about on the same level as the stuff that I saw that he did later on. I hadn't seen his short films at that point, but I think that's what he saw in it. He saw like this germ of something that maybe he could help grow.
Yeah, he saw himself. He saw passion on
exactly.
you.
And I also later found out from our mutual pal Scott Spiegel, who's in The Dead Next Door, that Scott told me that he always wanted to make a feature on Super 8. So he had an ulterior motive all along, even though we briefly entertained shooting it on video. He was the one that sort of was like, why don't we shoot it on Super 8? And I was sort of like, yeah, I did all my short films. Let's do it.
Okay, it was shot in Akron, your hometown. Did you got support from the community?
Oh, huge. We shot over the summer of 1986.
There's that money shot of a lot of zombies walking around on a helicopter shot, right?
Yeah,
that's like the $1 million shot.
Yeah.
It's so funny. People single that shot out, but it's actually a very simple shot. It's not, first of all, it's not a helicopter. It's actually a small plane, and it's landing on an airstrip that's right next to, that was an airport, an actual small airport. And in that little area was around a number of other places. There's as you see in the title sequence, there's that's called the Soapbox Derby, where the kids race the cars down the ramp or whatever. That was right behind that. And the Goodyear hangar there's a good shot of the zombies walking in front of it. There was all these Akron landmarks essentially that we shot all on that day. So we managed to get, I think it was 300 people to come out that day to be extras.
Wow,
and we
that's huge. That's huge.
But even then we were like 300 people, and I got up in the airplane because we did it a few times, and I'm looking down and I'm like, it's still not enough people. If it gets low enough, then it looks, when you sort of see it from a little more of the angle that wound up in the movie looked pretty good. But when you see it from directly above, it's like, wow, that's 300 people. It really doesn't look like it, because everybody in the entire crew that was there that day is out there too. We were just trying to bulk it up with as many people as we could. But really, for a small film like that, to get 300 people in one place and have the entire city, we had to get insurance and stuff to do it, but the city was very much behind it and supported, this crazy idea that I had.
Mm-hmm. You guys had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, it dragged on for too long. The bulk of it was shot in the summer of 1986, and then it went on for, really, 2.5 more years.
It reminds that Peter Jackson movie.
I'm sure Bad Taste.
Bad Taste. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very much the same story, because what it is, you start and you keep running. You run out of money, and then you got to go find more money, and you. Part of the problem when at the time that we started the movie, Sam had not yet started on Evil Dead 2, and then of course we actually, by the time he was shooting Evil Dead 2, we literally were standing on the porch on that cabin set down in North Carolina, where we made the decision to shoot it on Super 8. So then I went off and made the movie, and during that whole time he was finishing Evil Dead 2 and then had gotten Darkman and was starting on Darkman. So that's like over that course of those 4 years, he was actually made essentially 2 movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. But it was just it was a lot of, he was busy, and getting him to sign off on things, we'd have to wait for weeks on end to get a response, because he had obviously much bigger fish to fry, so to speak. So
yeah. So at the end of the second year, basically nobody believed that you get the movie finished.
Well, yeah, it became a problem. You would watch people drop out over time. I mean, when the bulk of the film was done, the majority of the crew went off and did other things, and there was a core group of us that sort of continued, and we would start editing, and then we would shoot pickup shots here and there. We still had a lot of little effect shots, like the finger coming out of the zombie's head, little things like that didn't involve the actors, that we would do. So we were still shooting things. We would just get together and shoot a few shots here and there, and edit it and figure out, oh, we need a shot of this, we need a shot of that kind of thing.
If any of the main cast would want to go, it was easy. You just had a bunch of zombies to eat them, right?
Most of them were good sports, and we kept bringing them back. And a lot of stuff, we would have mechanical problems or light. The lighting was the big one. With Super 8, you need so much light to expose the film properly. And we would keep shooting stuff, and then it would take 2 weeks to get the film back, and then you'd find out, oh, it doesn't look good. So we have to. Yeah. So the actors came. There were certain scenes that were just really annoying that we had to just shoot over and over and over again, and they didn't necessarily get any better. But Sam had very obligingly agreed to throw me a few extra dollars to reshoot the altar room scene at the end of the movie, and he actually encouraged me to go. It was one of the scenes that I was not very happy with, and he encouraged me to go back and rewrite it, which I did, and I got it exactly the way I wanted it. And then we were gonna bring all the cast back to reshoot this, and one actor refused, and he was sort of core to the scene. There was no way at that point I couldn't necessarily write him out of the thing, because he was still in the movie. So we unfortunately never did it. I just had to piecemeal it together from the footage that we had.
And it was probably different in looks. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that was the big thing, is getting people to come back and sort of groom them to where they're going to look this 2 years earlier.
When we started this podcast, and our second episode was The Dead Next Door. We started with Paulo's guilty pleasures. So the first one was Nemesis from Albert Pyun. You probably know. And the second one was the Dead Next Door. It was the second episode. It was about that movie. Our first guest was Albert Pyun, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so you should have been one of our earlier guests.
But actually, speaking of Albert Pyun, there's a small bit of trivia. David Barton, who did most of the makeup effects for Dead Next Door, actually went on to work on Albert Pyun's movies, and I believe that Nemesis was one of the ones he worked on.
Oh my God!
Full circle. Yeah, this is full circle for me.
We were still in college. We're living together, me and Paulo, when we were in college, and we had this thing of grabbing the weirdest, most obscure movie we could find on the internet and just watch it.
It's got huge boost for you, the internet, because now you can literally beam in everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the internet is like that gold mine for people who wants to find weird, obscure movies.
And there's a lot of them out there, that's for sure.
With the internet, you just found a bunch of people all over the world who likes to watch old B movies and have fun with them. So
I can't say that the movie itself was serious. I took it seriously, but it wasn't. I took the making of the movie seriously, but of course it's very tongue in cheek, and it's my goofball sense of humor. Things like the zombie biting the guy's finger off and it comes out of his throat. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But to this day, people are like, "Oh, that was so cool! I've never seen that before." But to me, it was just like, well, that's what would happen if the zombie, got its head cut off and it bit off a finger. It just seemed logical, but it seemed funny at the same. It's like my black sense of humor. Even the worst of movies, I tried to take them serious from the approach of actual making them, because it's such a huge amount of work to make any movie, and you can't go into it thinking, oh, we're going to make this pile of crap that two people are going to enjoy. You have to try and go into it and say, we're going to do the best job we can with the resources that we have. You have to have, you're making any movie, you have to have time and money. One or the other. And Ozone was going back to that film, that was a perfect example of, we didn't have the money, but we spent a lot of time on it. And I think the results were better than the stuff that I had made previously for that reason. We had just enough money to sort of pull it off to be watchable, but we had extra time to spend to try and make it a little bit better.
How did Bruce Campbell get to do his voice cameo?
With Bruce's involvement, I actually met when I called Sam originally. When he called me back, he actually put me on the phone with Bruce, because Bruce was in charge of basically their hiring. He was the guy he was the producer that was responsible, the hands-on guy of hiring. So he was the one I set up the meeting to go to Detroit originally. So and when I showed up there, he was there, and Rob Tapper was there, and Josh Becker and Scott Spiegel were in another office next door to them. So I knew all those guys from the times that I had gone back and forth up there. But we had gone. I had finished the picture part of the movie, and only the sound was left. And I had went, ironically, with out to California to see David Barton, a makeup effects artist who was working on another film, and a mutual friend of ours, Dave Lang, he wanted him to come out and work on the film. So I went out to California with Dave Lang, and while I was there, I happened to call Sam and say, hey, I'm in LA if you want to, talk about finishing Dead Next Door, because at that point we just had to do the sound. And he called me back almost immediately and was like, hey, let's finish it out here. And he went and put in a phone call to Bruce, and I don't know, he browbeat Bruce into doing it. And actually, I sort of realized later, after listening to Bruce's audiobook, if you've never read If Chins Could Kill, is a great book, and get the audiobook version that he reads, because it's very hilarious. But he was at a point in his career where he was having a lull, and I think he needed the money. So he was happy to do the job, and he never viewed it as like, oh, I got to finish this kids crappy Super 8 movie. He went in and treated it like anything else. I mean, he really just put his all of his time and effort into that thing to make it. But that's how it was, basically a favor. Sam said, look, I need somebody to finish this movie. He probably said, this kid doesn't know what he's doing, because I didn't with sound at that point. And I learned so much from that experience, because I was there for, I don't know, 2 months or something. We were there because I had to ship all my music equipment out there so that I could finish the music score, because I had scored probably 30 minutes of the movie, but it wasn't finished. So while Chris was there building sound effects, I was across the way in the valley, actually banging out the rest of the score. And then I would come in and we would do, zombie voices and ADR and all that kind of stuff. Because, we had to throw out all the production sound because it wasn't usable at the time. Yeah. So we had to build everything from scratch. It was a huge, monumental undertaking.
My curiosity is satisfied, because when I saw Bruce Campbell's name on it,
his name's not on it is because he was in the Screen Actors Guild. He was in the union, so for him to, there were a lot of other guys. Ted Raimi came in and did a voice, and Danny Hicks from Evil Dead 2 came in and did a voice, and then they called in a bunch of their friends to come in and play other characters, and they were all working actors that had their SAG card, so they couldn't really put their name on it even if they wanted to. But Bruce's name was in it as post supervisor. So
just a tip for selling the next edition of the Dead Next Door: put their names as big as you can on the cover. Believe me, everybody will buy it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You'd be surprised, but Bruce has actually been very, very good about it. We did this Ultimate Edition 3-disc Blu-ray a couple years ago, and the guy who wrote the liner notes actually sat down with Bruce and got him to give some nice quotes for it. So Bruce has actually been very open about that movie, and he's mentioned it, on a few times over the years. So yeah, I've always tried to let the movie stand on its own, but it's then occasionally, like it was really, when it was first released in Japan, the Japanese actually put like Sam's. They called it Another Evil Dead, the Dead Next Door, Another Evil Dead. which of course it has nothing even close to Evil Dead. But they actually put Sam Raimi Presents at the beginning of the movie, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And I learned a valuable lesson there too.
But that's very common now. You have Quentin Tarantino presenting Scott Spiegel's movies.
That's
also
agreeing to do that. Sam had not agreed to do. He did. That was the opposite of what he wanted.
Okay, let's move on to Robot Ninja. It was in '89, the same year you directed your first film.
Worst for last, I guess, right?
No special treatments here. The Dead Next Door was your first film. Both movies, your first film, The Dead Next Door and Robot Ninja, premiered in 1989, with a month apart from each other.
Technically, it was 1990, and actually, Robot Ninja came out about 6 months before Dead Next Door.
Oh yeah,
so most people don't even realize that. But here's the problem: because the movie took so long to come out, I think you had asked me the part of this question. I didn't really answer it, but it took so long for it to come out that we had all this support in the beginning. When we made it, by the time that it was finished, it was almost like a joke in the town. Not a joke, but it was sort of like people were angry. Like I would run into people who were extras, and they go, "When the hell is this
my movie?"
We want to see ourselves, and I'm like sitting there helplessly, like we're trying. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, I mean, the sad part is that then Dead Next Door still hadn't come out when we were making Robot Ninja, so we're trying to get the press to come out and cover the making of Robot Ninja, and they're all the like 2 or 3 of the articles were like essentially like these guys are making another movie and the first one's not even out yet. It's sort of like that's their spin on the article, and it was just like the curse of Dead Next Door for so many years. Robot Ninja came out. The VHS copies were released in early 1990. Dead Next Door actually didn't start circulating until like the summer of 1990, because I know that because I had moved to California in the spring of 1990, and it was like the summer of 1990 when Dead Next Door finally actually came out.
To summarize the story of Robot Ninja, we have Leonard, who is a frustrated comic book artist, and one day he witnesses a couple being murdered. With the help of an inventor, he becomes a masked vigilante, the superhero on his comic books, and Burt Ward, who played Robin in Batman series in the 60s, does a cameo. Were you inspired by the Batman comic books or the TV series when you wrote this screenplay?
No, absolutely. I mean, that was when I was growing up. I was saying that in the early 70s, that show was already in syndication at that point. So that was like I was saying, that was a great time to be a kid watching TV, because it was on every afternoon when I come home from school. It was that and Lost in Space and all these great shows were on like back to back in the afternoon. When we shot that stuff in Los Angeles with that role of the comic book publisher, there was a small list of people that was presented to me by the executive producers. Like, we can get any of these 5 or 10 people to play this part. Who do you want? And I think Burt Ward's name was like halfway down the list, and I saw it. I was like, Burt Ward, it's got to be Burt Ward, because it was like,
of course,
it was like the producer from Gilligan's Island and all these like actors that I grew up with. I would have been thrilled to work with any of them, but Burt Ward, just because it's a comic book tie-in.
Yeah, it was like
sense.
Fish in the water. Yeah.
There's no way Adam West wouldn't have done it, because I think at that point he had done a few low-budget movies like One Dark Night and Zombie Nightmare, and I think he learned his lesson that he probably shouldn't do those low-budget horror movies. So Burt maybe hadn't learned that lesson yet, so he was available.
You're playing on his innocence.
Yeah, playing on his innocence, and I think that was the last one he did, probably.
Oh,
okay. On this film, you had a smaller budget. How did you make it last during the entire production?
We had, I think it was $15,000 to make that film. Now, here's the thing: it was shot on 16 millimeter, so technically, it's a lot less money than Dead Next Door, which wound up being closer to $125,000. I think by the time it was done, we were all very excited I had a lot of the people that had worked on Dead Next Door came back to do this film, and we were sort of like getting the band back together, kind of thing. So there was an enthusiasm about it. Tim Burton was finishing Batman at the time. I think the Batman his Batman movie came out like a month after we shot Robot Ninja. So there was like comic book fever. Like it was a fun set to be on because we were just sort of like all enthusiastic about doing it until we saw the movie, and the enthusiasm was popped like a balloon.
When you saw Tim Burton's movie, or you're finished the movie?
When I first saw Tim Burton's movie in the theater, I was very, very disappointed. Now, that said, it's aged much better. Like I actually like the movie now, but at the time, I was very disappointed.
Why?
I loved the movie when I was a kid. I enjoyed it so much.
You guys are young. I saw it in 1989 when, all my hopes and dreams were pinned on that one movie, and it was just disappointing. Something about it was too Tim Burton and not enough Batman to me. I don't know. Something about I love Batman Returns much more. Like back at the time that those movies came out, the sequel I loved way more than the first film. But I think, now you look at, if you're going to compare it to like Batman and Robin, there's no contest. Batman looks like fantastic compared to that movie. So probably shouldn't admit this when the camera's in front of me. But I actually do like Batman Forever. I know a lot of people don't like that film, but
Val Kilmer is a shitty Batman.
Well,
not without nipples.
I have to understand. I went, you guys are younger, so in 1989, when all this build-up to Batman, even when Michael Keaton was announced as Batman, everybody was like, "What? Seriously, Michael Keaton?"
Yeah. I wasn't expecting him as well.
Oh, but he pulled it off. He
did.
He doesn't have the chin, we grew up with Adam West, and it was like. You're comparing everything against Adam West. You knew it wasn't going to be a silly Batman, and that's fine.
But the suit made all the difference. At that time, that suit and the car, it made the difference.
There's plenty of cool stuff. I'm not going to say that it was, but it was one of the more disappointing. It would be topped later by going to see Phantom Menace in the theater. Was probably my all-time worst movie going.
Yeah, I believe you.
Sorry. I'm not in a position to criticize anybody else's movies. I try to enjoy it.
No, man. Everybody can criticize everything.
We're alone. Nobody's listening to us. So
until you broadcast it on YouTube, and then everybody's like, "Did you hear what he said?" No, it's one man's opinion. It's like that's all.
Okay, let's criticize you this time.
Now you're the victim.
So you also play a small part on Robot Ninja.
Learned my lesson by that point.
It was a way to economize on the budget, or
no? It started with Dead Next Door because I took over a role in Dead Next Door of this guy Lloyd's, one of the cult members, and that was because I had cast literally like 5 people in that part, and it's not a big part, but I kept casting people and they kept dropping out, and finally I was just like, you know what? I'll just play this stupid part. It's like, why am I gonna deal with it's just such a small deal. So I survived that part, and then in Robot Ninja, I think it was more like, oh, it'd be fun to do this little thing. And my character's name, I named him Spinell after Joe Spinell, and I wore the white T-shirt and the greased hair. I was basically like Joe Spinell from Maniac.
I have to recall again Uwe Boll, because he said to us, extras were asking too much money to play small parts. So he just do the things himself. That's why he has so many cameos. He just wants to save money.
For instance, when I was an extra in Day of the Dead, it's like they gave you $1, to make when you sign the agreement, the release form, and to make it legally binding, they give you $1 and they give you a hat that says I was an extra in Day of the Dead. But we couldn't afford to give people $1, so we gave them a penny. And then it was signed, we gave them a penny, and that was it. You didn't get the hat.
Not even a Big Mac for lunch.
Everybody was like, "Why? I don't understand. Why are you giving me a penny?" It's like it's a legal thing, It's like just to make it legally binding.
It's like that script James Cameron bought to do the Terminator. I think it was
$1.
Yeah,
Gale and Earth. But they were fucking each other. That was allowed. she was his wife. Okay.
Okay.
On this film, I think it's recurrent in many of your films. It was mainly shot at night and in interiors. Is that because of the budget?
No, we were crazy. Shooting at night is way more expensive because everything takes longer. You're tripping in the dark over, cords and lights were breaking and knocking over. It's way more expensive. And the problem was we didn't have enough lights to light it properly. So the whole movie is, underlit.
The fight scenes were intercutted with the comic book shots. And that reminds me of the music video, Take On Me by Haha.
Yeah, because I was raised on MTV. My father had cable when I was young, in high school, and I'd go over there on the weekends and I'd do nothing but vegetate on the couch watching MTV. So of course, yeah, there was a huge. I can't say it was that. I'm pretty sure that stuff was in the script, but to me, the fight scenes were choreographed. They turned out so lame that it was sort of like a device that I tried to use to so the audience would pay less attention to the lame fight scene. By intercutting it. Like it's because it was the whole point of the movie was you're intercutting his reality with what's really happening essentially, because as he becomes more unstable, his visions get grander, and the reality is that he's a horrible superhero, and he's not succeeding at doing anything except eventually offing himself. Obviously, that's the only thing.
Now we have a lot of movies with that kind of superhero theme. I'm thinking about Kick-Ass, for example, and Super, that James Gunn movie called Super.
Yeah, that's one that a lot of people have brought up as like that those guys had to have seen Robot Ninja, because it's very. I have not actually seen the movie myself, but
it's a fun one. It's a funny one. You should see it.
Well, so is Robot Ninja, so unintentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the time that it came out, it was just quickly dismissed and it was reviled essentially. I mean, it actually got reviewed in Variety. I'm sure you know what Variety is, the big Hollywood.
Yeah, the magazine. Yeah.
It just ripped me a new butthole. I mean, it was just a horrible.
Okay.
And Gordon Magazine also ripped me a new one, and I actually had it's stupid me. I actually wrote a letter in complaining about their review, and then they ripped me again.
Oh, of course, man.
Like, just if you get a bad review, just let it go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe I was going through my ooey bowl mode because I was defending the movie, even though I hated the movie. You know what I mean? It's like it was some sort of weird, like. I mean, I guess you do that anyways, because it's like every movie we have the expression of it's a redheaded stepchild. Like the thing you don't want to talk about or see or whatever. Yeah. I look at all my work that way. But if somebody else trashes it, you'll be like, well, but it had this and that, and
I know.
You defend it, even though it's might be this horrible, mongoloid of a movie. You still want to defend it.
But you took the effort to do it, so you have to defend it naturally.
But I mean, the thing is, you have to understand how Robot Ninja was made, because I was originally I was trying to get a movie made for another filmmaker named Tim O'Raw in New Jersey, and he had a film called Basement, which was a horror anthology, and I liked the script, and I was trying to pitch it to Dave Dakota from Cinema Home Video, and he was interested in making it, and then I don't remember exactly what happened, but we had a meeting, and basically it was like I think he saw Tim's short films, and he wasn't sure what to do with it or whatever, so he turned to me and he's like, well, what else do you have? What else can we do? And all the scripts that I had at that point are things that I really wanted to make, but I didn't want to do them for cheap, because I knew this was going to be like $15,000-$20,000. So I didn't want to do any of that. And so I put myself in the position where Dave Dakota threw out a title, and he said, well, I've always wanted to make something called Robot Ninja. Can you make me a movie called Robot Ninja? And I'm sure he wanted it to be like a traditional B-movie robot, like a literal robot.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I don't want to let this pass, because I feel like there's a momentum here. I literally just finished Dead Next Door like the week before, so I wanted to make something. And so to salvage it, I said yes. And then I went on the Greyhound bus from Los Angeles back to Ohio, which is takes 4 days or something like that on the bus. And I came up with the story for Robot Ninja under those circumstances, and turned out to be this very dark, like the opposite of what you would expect it to be. I mean, even when you see the box art, you could never picture that that's what the movie winds up being. It winds up being completely different than the way it was marketed initially. It was marketed like a robot who's a ninja. You know what I mean?
I thought it was that thing for a long time also. Yeah.
Well, when it's done, you hope that that's what it is, but it's not. So
Scott Spiegel returns to do a small part, but you also have cameos from guys from Full Moon. You already said David Dakota. But you also have Scream Queen Linnea Quigley and Kenneth Hall. So you managed to have them because it was produced by Full Moon, is that it?
No, this was Cinema Home Video, which Dave Dakota's company. That he was just starting it. The film that when Dave Lang and I went out to California to work with, Dave was going out to work with David Barton, that film wound up becoming Murder Weapon, which is what Dave Dakota used to launch his Cinema Home Video label. So when I had this role, we shot just that one scene with the comic book publisher in his office. Those scenes were shot in Los Angeles. So Scott was living in Los Angeles. We had become friends after Dead Next Door. And so I knew I wanted him, and I had written him this sort of shticky comedy character, which he's really, really good at that kind of stuff. And he played it up even more, when we were shooting it. And there was a role of a secretary, and I asked Dakota, I said, can you get Linnea Quigley to do it? Because, of course, I was in love with Linnea from Return of the Living Dead and all of her early films. That was a no-brainer. And then we were shooting in the alley next to Cinema Home Video's offices for the stuff with Dakota's cameo, because I had convinced him he doesn't usually do a lot of on-camera stuff, but I was able to convince him to do it. And I don't remember if Ken was around, or I don't remember the circumstances of how we needed somebody to be a sort of a bystander, and wound up getting Ken to do it, because Ken had written tons of stuff for Dakota, Nightmare Sisters and Dr. Alien and all kinds of films. So yeah, that was all because of the Cinema Home Video.
For this music, I think the music is okay. It was scored by you.
Nice,
right?
Paulo.
I got some points here.
We don't agree on the music because I like.
You hated it. That's why I want you to rescore it.
But yeah, it's just a bunch of noise. It's just like
okay. But for me, it works on the editing level.
It was
the retro feel
to the picture. Like as I was watching it, I'm basically laying down tracks, and it's not an easy thing to do. And that was I had done that a little bit on Dead Next Door, but most of Dead Next Door I was able to sort of write and then just edit together. Where this was like literally like trying to just get through scenes, and I'm like, the scene's so horrible, I don't know what to do, and I'm just pressing buttons. And when I restore it, I want to do an alternate audio track where it actually has sort of a proper score with, I'm curious if that would improve the movie in some way.
It has a very retro feel because of the synthesizers, but I think it's very appropriate for the scenes. Did you ever consider making a CD with a best of the music from your films?
Well, there was actually cassettes of Robot Ninja and Skin Alive years ago, and Dead Next Door there's a CD of. But I'm going to, when we did the Dead Next Door Ultimate Edition, it was a 3-disc set. The third disc was a soundtrack CD, and when I do Robot Ninja, it's going to be the same way. The soundtrack CD will be in that set.
JR, we have this uncomfortable question we like to ask. What's your worst movie?
All of them.
No, you have to say the worst one.
Elect one.
That was uncomfortable. Worst thing that I've ever made?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I probably Humanoids from Atlantis.
Why?
Easily. Why? You watch it and you'll see. Okay. No, it's only 45 minutes because we were shooting it in this brutal Ohio winter, and I literally had to throw up half of the script because I was making it for Cinema Home Video under a deadline. It had to be done by a certain date. So I just had to throw out chunks of the script and just finish it. Like at the end, I literally was like, I don't know what to do here. Like I just let some of the cast were directing scenes in the movie just to get through it, just to finish it. Yeah, it's not a movie. Originally, I took my name off of it, but if you look it up on IMDb, it does show that I'm.
Oh, that's why you have a fake name. Yeah, an alias.
Yeah,
okay.
I blame somebody else when things don't work out well.
It's not always Alan Smithy.
Yeah, Alan Smithy, exactly.
No, that's too commercial.
Obvious.
I gotta have my
yeah.
I gotta have my own version.
Okay, JR, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
Robot Ninja, The Dead Next Door e Ozone, que também já foi abordado no passado, aqui no VHS, estão disponíveis em versões remasterizadas e com imensos extras em makeflix.com. Não confundir com Netflix, é mesmo makeflix.com.
O J.R. Bookwalter enviou-me também uma cópia do último filme que ele realizou. Ele não voltou a realizar mais, que foi o Deadly Stingers em 2003. Ele enviou-me esse DVD desse último filme, que ele diz que é o drama do costume, que o estúdio depois reeditou o filme à revelia dele. Eu publiquei na altura uma fotografia desse DVD, da capa do filme, e houve um dos atores do elenco que comentou a dizer: como é que é possível, isto foi editado em algum lado? É que eu entrei no filme e eu não tenho uma cópia desse filme sequer.
A Robot Ninja tem, por exemplo, uma página de Facebook oficial. Procurem por facebook.com/IamRobotNinja. E se estiverem com a mão na massa, podem também encontrar-nos por lá, como VHS Podcast, que de resto é o nosso nome de código, também no Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts e agora também no Patreon, caso queiram contribuir diretamente connosco com ideias, comentários e acesso exclusivo a futuros conteúdos. Prometemos regressar em breve, rijos que nem peros. Tchau, tchau!